So you know who should be watching this video? The folks at China. Xi should be watching this. Anybody that manages the finances in China, watch this video because you're an identical case study to what happened to Japan. So let's get right into it. Let me give you some crazy numbers for Japan. Japan is exploding 20 years in a row. Economy's growing, sometimes double digits over and over and over again. And then all of a sudden, the Bank of Japan, which is their central bank, like our Fed, just recently increased interest rates for the first time in 17 years? Yes. You mean to tell me their rates have been negative for 14 years? Yes. How is this even? You mean to tell me Japan, the previous high of what their market hit, Nikkei 225, hit 39,098 on December 29th of 1989, and it drops from 39,000 to 17,000, drops 60% the next couple years? Yes. You mean to tell me from 1989, the market of Japan, it doesn't recover to get back to that same exact number till today? Yes. What do you mean by that? I mean, during COVID, Dow Jones got down to roughly 16,000. Isn't Dow today roughly at 38, 39,000? Yes. So you mean instead of recovering in 3 or 4 years, it took them nearly 89 to 2024? How many years is that? 35 years? Yes. But how good were they doing, Pat, in Japan? I mean, you're talking like these guys were big numbers. You ready for some crazy numbers? Let me give it to you. The Japanese property market in the 80s was worth 4 times what U.S. property market was. But that's nothing. The Imperial Palace in Tokyo was worth as much as the entire U.S. state of California. Let me say this one more time. All these Silicon Valley companies in California, San Francisco, take San Diego, the expensive properties in San Jose, in Beverly Hills, all of those property combined was worth less, the entire state of California, than the Imperial Palace in Tokyo? Yes. You mean to tell me from 1956 to 1986, the price of land increased by as much as 5,000% in Japan? Yes. Do you also mean to tell me that the Tokyo real estate could sell as much as 139,000 square feet, which was nearly 350 times as much as Manhattan in the 80s? Trump's already in Manhattan 350 times as much as Manhattan. Land constituted 65% of Japan's national wealth. Japan was killing it. Then all of a sudden, poof, everything changed. Why? We're going to talk about that today. All right, so if you end up getting value out of this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, even if you're from China. But let's get right into it. So, Japanese economic miracle, period span from 1945 to 1991, marked by rapid and sustained growth post-World War II to the end of the Cold War. Japanese economy experienced rapid growth after World War II, becoming a global leader by the 1980s with the highest per capita GDP. There are many different factors, but these are 4 of the factors according to Berkeley Economic Review on why this took place, this growth that they've had. Number 1, technological innovation was a big factor with what Japan did. This is very interesting, by the way, when you look at these contracts being signed. So if you look at from 1950 to 54, then 55 to 59, not a big number, and then boom, 60 to 64, boom, 65 to 69, all this manufacturing. By the way, when you think about some of the major companies when they got started, Toyota, 1937, Honda, 46, Sony, 46, post-World War. So this is like hardcore growth, innovation, contracts being signed, technology. They're leading the way and everybody's following their lead. Then the second reason in the same article is capital accumulation. Between 1959 and 70, the ratio of personal savings to disposable income averaged 18.3% in Japan, while it was only 12% in Germany and at the same time 7% in America. 3, improvement in both quantity and quality of labor. The National Bureau of Economic Research estimated that it accounted for nearly 30% of the post-war Japanese growth. And last but not least, 4, expansion of international trade. Strategic planning and cooperation amongst firms, individuals, and the government were key to leveraging these 3 factors. These efforts propelled Japan to become the world's 3rd largest economy. The country's export-led growth model attracted significant capital and resulted in a trade surplus with the U.S. And at this point, to address the global trade imbalances, Japan participated in the Plaza Agreement in 1985 with other major economies. The Plaza Accord was a 1985 agreement among the G5 nations, France, Germany, UK, US, and Japan. The goal of the Plaza Accord was to weaken the US dollar in order to reduce the mounting US trade deficit, and this led to the yen and Deutschmark dramatically increasing in value relative to the dollar. An unintended consequence of the Plaza Accord was that it paved the way for Japan's last decade of sluggish growth and deflation. In other words, reverse market crash is what ended up happening to Japan during this time. So in other words, think about it. They're trying to weaken the dollar, okay? And by doing so, yen got so strong that then all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, we're not getting a lot of people that are buying from us. We got to do something about this because U.S. is not using the money to buy. Then they're like, let's cut rates so we can weaken the yen, so we can strengthen the dollar. But then when they cut rates in Japan, people started borrowing more money. I mean, it's just like this whole effect that's taking place to try to manipulate, it keeps backfiring on them, and this eventually ended up to their downfall. So obviously this leads to an absolute nightmare. And by the way, you may be like, why would that be a nightmare? Real estate properties, 4 times as much as U.S. The Imperial Palace in Tokyo was worth as much as the entire U.S. state of California, and 5,000% it went up in Japan, and Tokyo real estate could sell as much as $139,000 per square foot, which was 350 times Manhattan. Isn't all that stuff good things? No. That's what led to the bubble that they had, and then boom, 39,000 to 17,000 within 3 years, and it took them 35 years to recover. 35 years to recover. And that's called the lost decade that they went through. It was a pretty tough situation Japan went through, and this became a case study, again, why China should be watching very closely to the decisions they may be making, because similar things may be happening to them very soon. And by the way, you ever heard the whole concept of quantitative easing? Guess what country became the first country to use quantitative easing? An idea that was proposed by Richard Werner, an economist that we've had here before, and we had a very interesting conversation together. You guessed it right. Japan became the first country to use quantitative easing. Maybe U.S. needs to learn from what they were going through, and we shouldn't have done it. They did it in 2000, 2001. We ended up doing it since 2008, 2009, all the way through Trump, and then we stopped with that and we tried to do quantitative tightening. Anyways, long story short, that led to a very challenging time for Japan with their economy, which led to socially families struggling financially, saying, I don't know if I want to get married, and I don't know if I want to have kids, and I don't know if I want to start a family. How the hell am I going to pay for money? In Japan, if you look at Japan, is known as the sexless society. This is a country that statistically, they're not a country that, I don't want to say they don't know how to have fun. I've partied with a lot of Japanese people, they know how to have fun. But in Japan, because of how the economy was and what took place to them, they went through this phase and it was kind of accepted until recently. Things are kind of starting to pick up again, which is the reason why they're raising the rates for the first time in 17 years. And by the way, think about it this way. What do you think Japan's debt to GDP ratio is? So US's is 120 to 130%. Japan's is 255%. Just so you know what this means, if you wanted to go right now and go get a loan from a bank, and the bank is going to say, I want to get $1 million loan. You're going to ask, I want $1 million loan. No problem. What's your debt to income ratio? You know what banks look for? 36% or lower. If you're getting an FHA loan, it's 43% or lower. That means if Japan was a person that wanted to borrow money, you would say, get out. You're at 255%. You would say the same to US as well. China claims they're at 60%, but nobody believes anything those guys say. And by the way, I'm going to give you a stat that you're going to be sitting there saying, what the hell is this all about? So in 1990, Japan's population was 123.5 million people. 1990. That's 34 years ago. Do you know what Japan's population is right now? 123.294 million people today. 34 years later, Japan has a smaller population today than they had in 1990. How and why? Notice the sexless society today because of what happened. There's another reason for it. There's a book I was recommended years ago by a friend of mine, Byron Udell, that became one of my favorites called Hypomanic Edge. In the book, it talks about how America is 5% of the world population, but represents 30% of economic activity, and the abundance of people with hypomanic tendencies prepared to take enormous risks. Immigrants are more likely to be hypomanic. I know a couple of them like that. Americans work more than any other country in the world, but here's what's the part. Less shame and bankruptcy in America, more likely to bounce back after a failure. In other countries, they're ashamed and they're defeated. When asked if starting a new business was a respected occupation by Americans and Japanese, you ready? 91% of Americans said yes. Only 8% of Japanese said yes. Deep disgrace attached to business failure in Japan. Population has lost inclination towards risk after the market crash of 1990. That's like a kid goes play baseball. He gets hit once, he goes 0 for 4, never wants to play ever again because he's humiliated and he lost and he's afraid. That's what happened to Japan from 1990 till today. So remember how this whole episode got started? I said, pay attention if you're from China and you're Xi, right? What's the point? Japan went through this. They've had a hard time recover after that loss. China is going to be an interesting story to see what they do and how they recover and how they maneuver. they've been known for the art of war and kind of gamesmanship and all that other stuff. So maybe they're a little bit more strategic. But if they're not too careful, same thing can happen to them as well, no matter how behemoth of a country they are today. If you got value out of this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And President G, if you're watching this, maybe you want to have a conversation, you can find me on Connect. Here's my QR code. Just use that. Any question, we can do a text, a video, or a call together, or anybody else that wants to discuss the specific topic we just talked about. I get back to you 100% of the time within 1 day on Connect. And if you want to watch another video similar to this, watch the video we did on China's population challenges they're facing. If you've not seen it, click here to watch it. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye.